So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special edition of Street Cred. I'm so happy right now. We have the governor himself, Deval Patrick. How are you?
I'm great, Chris. Thank you. Thank you for having me. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm really psyched to talk to you.
I'm psyched too.
Because normally we don't speak to politicians. We're known to talk to local and international artists from all around the world. But this is very important to us because it indeed is a big step because we would like to talk to more of you politicians.
Well, you count too, you and your listeners. So I'm honored that you would include me in the broadcast. I'm glad to be asked. Thank you.
Great. So in preparation for this interview, I've actually done some homework on you.
Oh boy.
And I discovered that you actually grew up in Chicago, Illinois, minus a wealthy household like other politicians. Now, I like this indeed because I feel a connection with you because I live in Roxbury. And it's very, urban and, as they say in the news, dangerous and not. So I like this connection I have. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, sure. I did grow up on the south side of Chicago. I lived there with my mother and my sister and my grandparents in a two-bedroom tenement. I shared one of those bedrooms and a set of bunk beds with my mother and my sister. So you go from the top bunk to the bottom bunk to the floor every third night on the floor. We spent some time on welfare. I went to big and crowded and, broken and sometimes dangerous public schools. But, it wasn't always just about what we didn't have. We had a very strong sense of community. I mean, this is the 50s and the 60s now, so, those were the days when every child was under the jurisdiction of every single adult on the block. So if you messed up down the street in front of Ms. Jones's, she would straighten you out as if you were hers, And then she'd call home, so you get it 2 times. But I think what those adults were trying to get across to us is that, they had a stake in us. And they expected us to understand we had a stake in each other, that's what being in a community was about. And frankly, I think it's that sense of community that we have to rebuild all across this Commonwealth and all across this country. We have a stake in each other, and we ought to act like it.
Right, you're very correct. And like we say on Street Cred, you have this swag because of all this background you're coming from. Now, how can you use this in legislature to use it for, to give back to the urban communities here in Massachusetts?
Well, I guess a couple ways. One is that we can be more accessible to people in community, in poor communities, in middle-class communities. Folks who are well-educated and wealthy are very at ease coming to the State House and making a claim on their government, whether it's the governor's office or other parts of the executive branch or the legislature. But I've met a whole lot of people. Some of them I met in the course of the campaign, people who we invited to be involved in this grassroots effort who had never been involved before or who hadn't been involved in a long time, who didn't even know that the State House is a public building, that you could come in without an appointment. Doesn't mean you can get seen, but that you can come in, you can show up at people's offices, you can drop off letters and messages and so forth. And through a whole variety of ways, including this radio broadcast, I'm trying to stay connected with people. And it's hard, no doubt about it, because, I got a pretty demanding schedule. But I think that's how I assure myself that, that what we're trying to do is meaningful in people's lives, that the problems we're paying attention to are actually the problems that people care about. And I would say that we make a good deal of progress. We've learned some things, for example, and I'm sorry to go on, Chris, but for example, from some young people who came to the office actually once or twice without an appointment, and I was able to see because I had some free time, their own sense of there not being a youth voice, particularly an urban youth voice in policymaking. And from that, we've begun to create something called a youth council, statewide youth council, to bring in, and it's not fully formed yet, and maybe you or your listeners, if they're interested, would like to be a part of this, but we're trying to organize now young people from all over the Commonwealth to come together on a regular basis and to advise me and my staff about concerns in neighborhoods and to hear what some of our solutions are or can be. And also to understand the way government works. We can't solve every problem in everybody's life. But most people aren't looking for government to solve every problem in their lives. They're looking for government to help them help themselves, to be a partner with them. And to the extent humanly possible, that's just what I want to do.
Okay, that's good. And I want to mention that you do have a very hectic schedule. And I would like to thank you for, doing this right here, speaking to me on Street Cred. This next part is issues for teens here in the city. Yes. There's a few of them, we listen to them on the news and whatnot. But these important ones are teen pregnancy, increasing gang member violence, and the murder rates. Now, how are you working to address these issues?
Well, let me say, first of all, the bad news, the problems are what get the news, and I want to first acknowledge all the good kids who are doing good things. Here you are, we're surrounded by some of your colleagues from school and from the neighborhood who are doing constructive things. I meet young people all across the city and all across the Commonwealth who are very involved in very constructive things, and I want to acknowledge and honor them. There are, and I shouldn't say good kids, bad kids, they're all our kids. There are issues around violence, youth violence, that have been a particular concern of mine. And in Boston and elsewhere, we are working closely with local authorities, not just law enforcement, as important as that is, but with social service agencies and with community organizers and youth workers on how we develop the strategies that are going to matter and really make a difference in in dealing with some of these challenges. I mean, I think more police is, in some communities, a part, not the solution, but a part of the solution, because everybody is concerned about safety. Right. But I also think, some things that are viewed in some quarters as softer measures, maybe where there's not such a direct result, but that also matter, like helping young people learn peacemaking and problem-solving skills so it doesn't accelerate into somebody feeling disrespected and then going off the deep end and getting or looking for a firearm and doing something foolish. I think we also need to offer alternatives to gangs for young people, because most young people, no matter what neighborhood they're coming from, they want to belong to something. They want to feel cared about. They want to feel a part of a team. They want to, they want a community. It's back to the point I was making about the South Side of Chicago, and we have to create environments for that make sense, that are up to date and modern and so forth. Some of those are supporting after-school programs, stuff like even as simple as midnight basketball and what have you. And we've been looking at all those different strategies, and to the point of the Youth Council I mentioned earlier, see, I think it is not enough to have people downtown in the State House coming up with these ideas, or in city halls for that matter, coming up with those ideas all in isolation and then just issuing those edicts out into the neighborhoods. We have to have the young people tell us what is going to matter for them, what's actually going to make a difference for them. So I wouldn't say, and I'd be the first to admit, I don't have a magic wand here, but we are through the budget trying to come up with some additional resources to address youth violence and so-called at-risk behaviors. Okay. Also trying to mobilize more of those resources from private donors and from foundations and so forth, working very much in partnership with local government and local law enforcement and clergy and neighborhood organizations, and also looking at ways that we can begin to put more youth workers on salary out in the community to help us with a sort of a